The Atlanta Braves farm system is better than we give them credit for, and I brought in an expert to prove it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Tuesday, October 22nd. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. And another person on Substack, some of you may know him. If you don't, you're about to. My friend Chris Clegg of the Dynasty Dugout. It's a really unique Substack, very prolific, but combining prospecting with fantasy using both live looks and data. It's a really unique approach. And I wanted to bring Chris in because he lives in Braves country, so a Braves fan, but has a chance to go to a lot of these games, these minor league games, and see these prospects. Chris, thanks for being here, and thanks for making time in your busy, prolific publishing schedule to come on and chat Braves.
No, thank you for having me. It's always a good time to chat with you. And yeah, we always think the off season is going to be slow down, but it feels like it doesn't in a sense. Like it's more work. I'm doing every team top 30 write-ups. So it's pretty like essential work, but it's good. Heading out to the fall league next week. So that'll be fun. And yeah, it's good to get on chat with you.
See, there we go. So to follow what Chris is doing in his content on Twitter at RotoClegg is the way to follow him. Tons of videos going to be coming from the Arizona Fall League. But again, the dynastydugout.com, it is absolutely worth a subscription. There's a huge, prolific Discord full of information. He's got data resources, like he said, prospect write-ups, Arizona Fall League recaps from every single day. So definitely go check it out. And I want to start off our conversation. I know a lot of what you're able to go watch in person, some of the lower levels, whether it's your Rome, your Augusta, things like that. But I want to start off with the top of the system, right? The upper level prospects that we think could help in MLB next season. And I think the biggest one fans are clamoring for and have questions about is Drake Baldwin. Really good year behind the plate when he got to Gwinnett. We know that Mississippi was a terrible place to hit for power, right? The offensive stats don't really look normal for any prospect coming out of Mississippi. But what you saw in Gwinnett, is Drake Baldwin ready to help at the major league level, or does he need more time?
I think he is pretty close to ready. I think that he made some good strides defensively. Mm-hmm. He's got some pretty good pops, quick release. I've got a couple pops around 2.0, but got one as low as near 1.9. So that's pretty solid. I look at the profile behind the plate, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that Baldwin would need to show that he's ready. Mm-hmm. I'm interested with the roster situation. What do they do? Do they pick up Travis d'Arnaud's option? Is it a case where you can decline it and let him walk? And he's been valuable to the team. So that's the thing. Do you just let him go? I have a hard time seeing that, but Baldwin's ready, in my opinion. He'll be 23 years old on opening day. So it's not like he's super young by any means, but the bat's really what's going to play. And I think could be a really good compliment to Sean Murphy. We know that they like to run that platoon situation. And obviously with the contract that Murphy signed, you would expect him to play more often. I know injuries bother him this year, but yeah, Baldwin's bat is certainly there. Mississippi's a good reason to say minor league surface stats are irrelevant in a lot of ways. And I'm curious how Columbus will play. So that'll be a new thing to look at next year. But even Rome it can skew hitters' numbers pretty substantially. It's not really until we see Braves prospects in AAA where it's, okay, wow, they're hitting for power. Where did this come from kind of thing? But Baldwin's been a guy that's always put up really good under the hood numbers. Last year, I think it was around like 105 mile an hour, 9th percentile, which is pretty strong. Yeah, that's above average to plus range, especially given his age. You fast forward to this year, it was much more the same. It was average exit velocity near 92, 9th percentile over 106. Like those things are going to play for sure with the bat. And the plate discipline is also highly impressive. Doesn't chase all that often. He walks at a high clip. He's going to put the ball in play and make things happen. So, yeah, I think Baldwin could certainly step in next year. And I think that he's proven that he's ready. And even you go back to last year or 2023, I don't even think like 2024 was like a huge breakout. I think 2024 was just putting it all together from the skill set that he had. And now it's okay. Like we've seen what Baldwin can do. He's put up good under the hood numbers for a while now, and it's finally all coming together on the surface, and it looks like he's ready. So I'll be interested to see what the offseason looks like for Atlanta, but I think that there's a fair argument that he is ready for the majors at this point.
Yeah. AA mentioned in that press conference, that end of season press conference, that they intended to pick up Travis d'Arnaud. They haven't done it yet. He pointed out you have until 5 days after the World Series. They always wait just in case something happens. But this is also a position where you've seen injuries from both incumbents every single year. And AA alluded to 2021 season and the fact that Atlanta had to use 7 different catchers in that year. So it feels like he values Baldwin. They just haven't really played the young guys. And I would hope if Baldwin had to come up that he would have an opportunity to play more than once a week or so. At this point, it's just so hard to break in at the major league level because of the long-term contracts you have everywhere and the expectations this team has. And I think that's something that you've seen with some of these next guys on the list that I want to get to. AJ Smith-Shawver, meteoric rise through the system in 2023. Started off in the low minors and debuted in like May in Arizona. And he's dealt with a little bit of injury. He had a scoreless outing this last season against the Cubs, tweaked an oblique and missed multiple months. A lot of public prospect evaluators, your MLB pipelines, your Baseball Americas, things like that, are a little down on AJ Smith-Shawver. But I think both of us understand the injury and some of what Atlanta did to him is maybe reason to not be as concerned as some of the national outlets would have you believe, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's important to remember that he is still just 21 years old as we are talking right now. He debuted back at a 20-year-old last year. And honestly, I wonder if his development was a little bit stunted by the fact that they rushed him so much last season. He's been put in pretty bad spots, if we're being honest. Last year, the 2023 playoff game in Philly, never an ideal spot to pitch. That's probably the rowdiest playoff environment you can get. And then this year, he obviously pitches in the playoffs again in San Diego. Like, he's been put in tough spots. And considering the fact that he pitched just one major league game this year and then pitches in the postseason, like, I don't think there's a lot to take away from that. And sure, the AAA numbers weren't exciting this year, but I think there were some positive developments, in my opinion. The four seam early in the year, it actually had ticked up pretty substantially. And part of me wonders if it was a thing of him trying to harness like newfound velocity. He ended up settling in around 95 this year, but he can reach the upper 90s. It's high IVB, very good spin efficiency, low vertical approach angle. It's a flat angle, which makes it tough to hit. A 25% whiff rate on a four seam is really good, actually. And I think people look at that, but that's a good number for a four seam. It's heavy extension, 6'8" extension. I think the biggest positive development this year was its changeup. 44% whiff rate. That'll play. He used it 25% of the time. It was used 6% of the time in 2023. It's heavy fade, some decent carry through the zone and late kind of drop and fade, low spin rates, a deceptive offering. And I still think both breaking balls are really good. He added that curveball back in 2020, the slider wipeout offering. I think that you look at this 4-pitch mix, and I think it still has a great chance to play. The sweeper was interesting. Like, they kind of toyed with the shape of the slider sweeper this year. And then he stopped throwing it in August and beyond, which, who knows? The Braves do interesting things with their pitch development. I don't want to question it because they've had a lot of success.
But they're usually right. Yeah, it's hard to question them.
Yeah. So the biggest issue, I think, this year was the home runs, 20 home runs allowed, 9 of those on the fastball. I think the locations hurt him a bit. There was just some missed pitches with the four seam over the heart, and he just got hit. So, I think if he cleans up that problem, there's still a lot of upside. Again, like, we're looking at somebody who, if he had gone to college, would have been draft eligible this summer. And we're talking about somebody who had pitched in the majors. There would have been a sophomore in college. So I think people have already had fatigue with this guy, but he's still so young. And I think there's still so much more development to be had. And it's hard to deny that talent in Arsenal. So I'm not out on him at all. Sullivan's my second ranked Braves pitching or overall prospect, only behind Baldwin, top ranked pitching prospect. And I still think that there's reasons to be very high on AJ Smith-Shawver.
Yeah, it feels like, one, being fully healthy, and then just not like getting rid of the tinkering, right? Not try to change that slider midseason, things like that can really do a lot to help him take the leap that the fans are waiting for. And I believe that because you've seen these leaps in the past. And something you do a great job of in that write-up is explaining about how Atlanta, a thing I've talked about in the pod before, about how Atlanta likes to pare down a prospect's arsenal. They like to go fastball slider, get that polished, bring back in the curveball, which they did last year, and then bring in something like a changeup. And he really threw a lot of changeups in spring. And he told us in spring training that he's just trying to get comfortable with the pitch in all these different situations. And so just looking at how he was able to take that leap in 23 or 22 and another leap in 23, you can see how he could do it again with a fully healthy offseason. So I'm in, and I feel like he's got a pretty good chance of coming into spring training and winning a starting job, just depending on how his offseason goes, what moves Atlanta makes, the transactions. We talked about the possible signings on yesterday's show, everybody. And just, I guess, how competitive the Braves are at finding competition in the rotation. But I like what Smith-Shawver does. I think he probably has a better shot than Hurston Waldrep of getting a rotation spot out of spring training next year, simply because Waldrep hasn't really had nearly as much development time as Smith-Shawver has.
Yeah, I agree with you. Waldrep he has got plenty of raw talent. We'll talk about him, but yeah, I think that it's AJ's job if he wants it. If he'll perform and they don't go out and sign or trade for some guys, like there's an opening and there's that availability for AJ to be someone that I think could contribute to that team all season in 2025.
Yeah. Talk about a guy competing for a job in 2025. Nacho Alvarez. There's not a lot of shortstops in this system. I've written about that on the Substack. You touch on that in your write-up about how there's just not a lot of shortstop depth in this organization. We saw him come up to cover for Ozzie Albies during the injury, really struggled. And some of the questions have been twofold here. Offensively, is he going to be able to hit enough to supplant Orlando Arcia? And can he actually stick it short? Because it feels like his range and a lot of his stuff doesn't necessarily stand out at the most important defensive position in the infield. Do you think he can do it? Or is this something where at best it's probably you're trading offense for defense?
Yeah, no, I think he's probably a second baseman long term. Can he move well enough to be a shortstop in like the immediate future? Maybe, but it's not a super skilled like glove at shortstop. I do think he is more valuable at second base. I know now you have to have range at both middle infield positions. And I won't say like Nacho doesn't have range because I've seen him make some good plays at shortstop. We've obviously seen him be there most of his minor league career and didn't really play a ton of second base until the Albies injury, and we saw him in the majors. And that's obviously a big leap to really take. But I do think that it's the kind of profile where it's the hit over the glove, and not to say he's been bad by any means in the field. I think he's serviceable. And it's one of those cases where like a team that was comfortable like rolling Vaughn Grissom out there before they traded him, obviously they knew better. Like they knew they were going to trade him, or that at least was in the plans. I think that it's a case where they're okay saying if we get offensive production, we'll be okay at shortstop. Obviously, you want a shortstop that can give you kind of tools across the board, give you the ability to hit, but also the ability to have a good glove. But I think in the Braves situation, they're okay with it. Arcia is a good defensive shortstop, which does help him out. I mean, it's hard to I think it's hard to quantify fielding on a piece of paper, like with different advanced data points, but Arcia does grade out pretty well at shortstop. Alvarez, definitely a hit over power type. He did break out in the sense of where he hit 10 home runs in AAA this year in 289 plate appearances, 0 in Mississippi and 202. So again, that shows you that discrepancy in the kind of environment that we're looking at. The power underlying metric still a bit below average, but that's okay because Alvarez is going to put the ball in play. He's going to walk. He provides a lot with the bat. And for somebody as young as he was, I thought that his progression has been really solid across the board. I like Alvarez. Is he the starting shortstop in 2025? Maybe not. Yeah, he could certainly start in AAA and continue to work on that development. He will still be 21 on opening day next year. So it's not like they need to push him, especially with Arcia, and who knows what they do. But yeah, I think that it's a solid profile, not flashy. If he develops more power, I think he becomes pretty intriguing.
Yeah, and the thing that makes me feel good about Alvarez's defense being a little bit better than maybe I think we see right now is one, you see these young players just they get better as they get to the majors defensively. But Orlando Arcia as a player doesn't have great foot speed. grades out really well on range. Some of that's positioning, some of that's instincts and things like that. But these are all things you can pick up that Atlanta can help him with. And so I do feel good about that. Before we go to break real quick, I want to ask, what are the chances that Atlanta might get another surprise promotion and debut next year out of a guy like a Drew Hackenberg? Somebody who it felt like he may have been overdrafted when Atlanta took him in the draft. I don't quite think a lot of people expected him to go that high or get over slot, but he's already made it up to AAA in his first full season in the minors. What's the prospect of a 2025 Drew Hackenberg season?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me at all, especially with how they pushed him this year. And it's interesting, his development path this year, because I saw him early May in Rome, and I saw him again early June when Rome was in Greenville. And it was really interesting because he set like 90, 93. And then by the end of the year, it was like averaging 94, touching 96. I'm like, okay, this is pretty interesting to see. I was like, how did this happen? He's got the frame. You see it. It's okay. Like, he should throw a little harder. He was a draft eligible sophomore. So again, he had a little bit less experience in college. But the progression I think he made this year was like, wow, there's certainly something here with Hackenberg. It's a slurvy curveball in the low 80s. He throws it to both lefties and righties. It's a 2-plane break, 10 inches of arm side movement, some good depth to it as well. Throws an upper 80s cutter, has a good change. It's in that similar velo range to the cutter. It's 86, 88. I think it plays pretty well off of it. But again, I think the command, like his ability to locate, is what makes Hackenberg so good. And if the stuff ticks up, it's okay. You keep the locations and you now have a 94 mile an hour fastball. All of a sudden, we're really looking at something, because when I've seen him, he works both like inner and outer halves extremely well. Like, he can paint. The results were there all year. His good durability. He's able to pitch deep into starts, keeps the ball on the ground, weak contact, and the ability to strike guys out. That was something that I really didn't see coming from the early season looks, is like the strikeouts, but that trended upward all year. The whiff rate trended upward. He allowed just 2 home runs all season, which was wild to me. It's something I didn't realize till really diving in on him.
129 innings.
2 home runs. Like, that just shows you the kind of, prospect ability to keep the ball on the ground, weak contact, and miss bats. Like, that'll play. So far, it's been extremely good development for Hackenberg. And it's one of those where I wouldn't be shocked if he makes a start in Atlanta in May next year. It's the progression he's made so far.
He feels almost like the platonic ideal of a sinker slider guy, because he's throwing multiple fastballs. He can strike you out if he needs to. He can turn around and he could go with stuff that'll give weak contact. It reminds me, it's not nearly the same. I'm not saying this, but it reminds me of the interchangeability Max Fried has had at times, where Fried can say, I'm just going to let them leave the ball on the ground, not get hard hit balls, not get barrels, and get out of this. And then Fried can turn around and strike out the side in an inning if he needs to. And it feels like Hackenberg is trending more that direction than just what he came out of Virginia Tech as a sinker slider guy. So I like the potential. He's one of the ones I'm really excited to watch, because it just feels like he's taken a leap in this one full season in the minors. I'm curious to see what he does. And talking about guys who may have taken a leap, in just a second, we're going to go into some of Chris's live looks of guys in the lower minors and some of the guys he's excited about. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby, Chris Clegg, the Dynasty Dugout. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at RotoClegg, and go check out the dynastydugout.com. Absolutely fantastic resource for both prospect and fantasy interested adjacent folks. I'm proudly a subscriber, and it's definitely absolutely worth it. Again, also great community on Discord. Lots of really great people, fans of all teams, great conversation. Okay, so like I said earlier, you really get a chance to watch a lot of these prospects in person in the lower levels, whether it's Augusta, Rome, things like that. You've covered a lot of guys. I do want to talk briefly about Caminiti. The top pickup from Atlanta. I don't think anybody expected him to fall to Atlanta. I don't think anybody expected him to not require an overslot deal to sign, but it goes back to that reputation Atlanta has as a pitching development factory, or being really good with pitching. What are your expectations for him as he enters his first full season in the system?
Yeah, it was interesting that he debuted to begin with, but not shocking. Every year, I feel like the Braves have more draftees debut in full season ball. But for a prep arm that was pretty young, I think he was 17 on draft day, he reclassified. Yeah, so he's supposed to be 2025 draft class. He turned 18 in August. He debuts the end of August. It was interesting. You never really know what you're going to get from a debut. It's a lot of emotions, a lot of nerves. And again, we're talking about an org that they do funny things with pitchers, but Caminiti was a predominantly like really solid changeup in high school. He only threw it once in the first start, which is interesting. This is the same exact thing they did with AJ Smith-Shawver. If again, we're talking one start. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's not going to throw a changeup more next year. But AJ Smith-Shawver's first year was, hey, come in as a 4-pitch guy. We're going to strip these pitches away, focus on fastball slider to really like hone in those offerings. And that's really what we saw from Caminiti in the debut, where it was a lot of fastballs. I think that I need to find it in the write-up. I think that 19 of his first 22 pitches were fastballs in the start, which is interesting. By design, I don't really know, but that's what it was. I'm like, okay, this is interesting to watch. It's a lower release height from his 6'2" frame, 5'8" release height. It's pretty good IVB on that offering. 93 to 95 in the first inning. He was a little amped, but he set closer to 93 the rest of the start, which is fine. This is a guy that just turned 18 making his pro debut. Yeah. But as the start went on, like he threw more sliders. He did throw one changeup in, which was, I had to go back and look on my video because I actually didn't remember that. I was like, I don't think he threw a changeup at all. And I saw some reports that he did. So I had to go back and watch like my film on it a couple of times. Oh, there it was. Like that was a changeup. It was actually, it was 86 miles an hour, left it up to Austin Charles of the Royals, who hit it up the middle for a double. But aside the point, like Caminiti repeated really well, like for his age. Like I think the mechanics are pretty clean, good mover on the mound, good athleticism, loose arm action. He's pretty smooth. Yeah, I think that the interesting thing is he's a natural pronator, which makes it harder to spin the ball, and especially like from a breaking ball standpoint. But I thought that his slider actually was pretty good, all things considered. Like that's the pitch I think a lot of scouts had questions about as he was in coming into the draft cycle was how would this new slider work? So something that he really worked on adding in the spring of his senior year was this kind of new look slider. And given the natural pronation, like he's naturally going to be better throwing like arm side pitches, but to be able to spin that slider, I thought it looked pretty good overall. And I think that's something the Braves are going to put a heavy focus on is that slider development. And I think that the ability's there right now. I think you can project like at least 3 above average offerings, maybe even better as he continues to develop. And I think the fastball, maybe you tweak the shape a little bit, see what they can do with it from that release point, and has the potential to be a really solid offering. I think that there's potential he's throwing a curveball like with heavy depth at times. So can he get back to that? It's highly possible. So this will be a development path that'll be interesting to follow. Do the Braves push him aggressively? Still to be determined, but I think he's got all the flashes of being like a mid-rotation starter. So I'm really excited to follow this development path and certainly fun to get out and see his pro debut.
Yeah. And it's one of those guys that you can definitely see in just the brief glimpse we got. That's why that they took him so high. I do think you see a guy come back after a long layoff and not really throw a feel pitch like a changeup. It makes sense that, hey, those pitches are really a feel thing. I remember talking to Spencer Strider at spring training about how the changeup's just so hard to master and you have to really feel it that day. And so it makes sense he wouldn't throw a lot of them, but it's just exciting to hear that it's promising set up. And I think you're right on it. I'm really curious to see what he does in full season ball for a full season as far as a pitch mix is concerned. Another guy you saw prior to getting injured, Owen Murphy, was one of those 2 young preps. We saw Ritchie and Murphy kind of drafted together. Ritchie already had Tommy John. Murphy went down for Tommy John. But before he went down, he was looking really impressive, wasn't he?
Yeah, and it's certainly sad because I was actually at the start that he blew out. It was an odd
So
start.
it's your fault, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's your fault.
yeah, 100%. It was Nashville. It was like a cold, rainy day, and he was flat out dominating. He was 6 scoreless, 11K, and they brought him out for the 7th, which is bizarre, just given the standpoint of, it was he didn't need to keep being pushed that way.
Right.
But I guess they're looking at, and I'm not saying that's the reason he blew out his arm. I actually didn't even know like immediately. It wasn't like one of those things where he throws the ball and it's like, oh crap, like he just blew out his elbow kind of thing. It was interesting because it was like, okay, it was you watch and there was some, you watching the dugout and you're like, okay, something wasn't fully right. And then he doesn't make his next start. And so you do a little digging and you're like, and I was found out that, okay, here's why. Like he's having Tommy John, which he got a couple opinions on, which sucked. But that start was incredible. 6 1/3, 11K, no walks, 3 hits, no runs.
Dominant.
The arm that we saw all year. He was just incredible. And I saw him last year when he was with Augusta still. This is a totally different pitcher. Like my first look at Owen Murphy was like, this guy looks tiny on the mound. Like it was a little uninspiring. Yeah, he's athletic. Like he was a two-way guy out of high school, but he's set in like the 90-mile-an-hour range, had some like a lot of 80s with the fastball when I saw him. And it was like, I just don't quite see this, but the developmental jump into 2024 was huge because not only did the fastball take a leap, like from a velocity standpoint, was working 91, 94, but we're talking a significant jump in IVB, just jumping out of his hand. The release point, it was significantly better, like hides the ball extremely well, locates it up at the top of the zone, extremely flat approach angle, and it missed bats. The fastball was incredibly dominant. He was throwing more strikes too, which was substantial. He had a 69% strike rate in his small sample of starts,
Right.
but still, we're looking at 41 innings. That's like top of the scale. Like when you look at like a Zebby Matthews, who is one of the best command control guys in the minors or was in the minors, he was at 69% all year. So
right there, yeah.
Murphy was right there with him. And it was pretty impressive just to watch. I think that the slider and the curveball, distinct offering, slider in the mid 80s, some good depth and sweep, curveball, more downward action, but some two-plane break as well, around 80 miles an hour. He'll flash a changeup, which I think would be the next step of his development coming back. It's just unfortunate that it got cut short. Yeah, we could be talking about Owen Murphy as a top 5 overall pitching prospect, like in baseball. That's the kind of season he was having, the kind of progression that he was making. He just turned 21 in the end of September. So it's okay. You'll miss the entire age 21 season of development. You hope that we probably know in the Braves, we probably don't see him in action next year. Not ruling it out, but it's more likely that he goes to the complex and just works back and we see him in 2026. But again, he'll be just 22 years old the next time we see him. So it's not like he's going to be old prospect. But if he comes back and is 95% of what we've seen, then I think it's an extremely exciting pitching prospect with a lot of intrigue because I think that Owen Murphy was somebody that was on track to potentially be in AAA by season's end this year if he hadn't needed Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, which is it's you always hate to see a young guy get hurt, but especially one who is having such a dominant year like that and having a breakout. But it shows one, you could never have enough pitching prospects because they're always going to get hurt. Also gives ammunition to people who say there's no such thing as a pitching prospect because they always get hurt. And talking about a guy who had been hurt and came back this year and isn't all the way back, but is still showing some promise is J.R. Ritchie, the other part of those two prep draftees back to back there in that draft. You saw him pitch a little bit. The velo's not quite there, but overall, it's still an impressive package, right?
100%. Yeah, Ritchie, he prior to TJ was sitting like 94, touching 98. This year he was sitting like 91, 92 most times. Like he probably averaged around 91 when I saw him, which is fine. Like he was touching 93. I think that comes back with time. He's still so young, to 21 years old. And he's got a frame that you look at and you say, all right, like I easily see the strength being added back. He's going to be fine. The slider's a heavy sweeping pitch, mid 80s. He does an excellent job landing all of his pitches for strikes, but he can throw that sweeper and get chase out of the zone. Changeup has flashes of being really good against left-handed batters. I think it's a well-rounded arsenal. It's really good command, especially coming back from TJ. I think that's always an encouraging sign when they're throwing strikes. You look at Andrew Painter, who has just made a couple of starts in the AFL since coming back, but the arsenal's there. The command isn't. That's something that takes a lot of time. So to see Ritchie, I think, come back and throw strikes and have the majority of his arsenal back, I think full offseason, we see him come back next spring. I wouldn't be shocked if he's sitting 94 again. And all of a sudden, this is a guy that could have a huge breakout in 2024 and be a top 100 prospect. Like very good arsenal, very good command. I like J.R. Ritchie a lot.
Yeah, you can definitely see, again, the reputation this organization has is warranted and the pipeline that you're building in separate years and the waves of talent that could come up as they get healthy. As we wrap this up, quick reminder for everybody, there are, I believe it's 30 write-ups just in the Atlanta Braves top prospects article, again, dynastydugout.com. Go subscribe to Chris and all of his great work. Who's the lower level player that you saw in person that I guess impressed you the most, or that we're not really talking about? I've got like different names that I'm thinking of for
Yeah.
different guys, whether it's a shortstop, a pitcher, whatever. But who's the guy that we're not talking enough about at the lower levels?
Yeah, there's several that I really like. I saw Jeremy Reyes, actually another start where he blew out. So I have bad luck watching Braves pitching prospects.
Jeez.
Augusta was in Columbia and Reyes blows out and doesn't pitch the rest of the year. So
Gosh.
unfortunate there. He was really impressive, I thought, all year, where he's one that I thought probably could take that step forward a little bit on the smaller side, but another one where it's like, God, this stuff's really good. Didier Fuentes is probably the guy where it's, yeah, this stuff is ridiculous. The results have been there, but yet he's gotten like no pub on any major outlet. I don't even think he was on Baseball America's top 30. And this is a guy like I like as much as any pitching prospect in the system, really, considering, he was 18 years old this year. The number of players in full season ball to start the year at 18 are few and far between. And Fuentes reached single A back in 2023. This year, 2.74 ERA, 98 strikeouts to 21 walks, and 75 and 2/3. It's a heavy strike thrower for his age. Like when I see a pitching prospect that's throwing strikes at 18 years old in full season ball, 67% strike rate's really good. He's missing bats. The fastball already touches 97. It's 93 to 95. Very flat vertical approach angle, 16 inches of IVB, which is above average, 13 inches of horizontal. The issue with that is that he throws it 70% of the time. So I'm like, all right, we got to sequence a little better here.
Yeah.
But you've got the flashes of something that's really good. Slider has good traits. It's 83. It's a gyro shape, shorter horizontal, some decent carry and late drop, but good spin rates on it. The splitter, I look at the splitter, I'm like, all right, this is a pitch I definitely want to see you use more. 6% usage this year, 86 mile an hour split. You talk about Hurston Waldrep splitter, like this splitter is really good and it's low spin rates at 800. And this is a terrible, if you read the write-up, if you know me, I hate player comps because it gives an unrealistic expectation.
Yep,
but
same.
metrically, a lot of Fuentes' splitter like metrics are very similar to Kevin Gausman, who
one of
he
the
has
best players in baseball.
Yeah. And so obviously that's a far cry from a comp, but just when we look at the metrics of that pitch, that's the closest comp I found in the majors, which is interesting. So young talent, I think he could explode next year. I'm shocked he hasn't already because he's in my Braves top 10. And I think the Braves top 10 is actually pretty good. So I think we talked about at the beginning of the show. I think the system is better than people give it credit for. But Fuentes is a really good prospect. Like him a lot. I do want to highlight before we move forward, Herick Hernandez, who they drafted this year in the 4th round.
I tweeted about him the other day. I love his stuff.
Yeah. Here's the thing to note. The University of Miami is terrible with pitchers.
What is it with schools in Florida? University of Florida's bad at it.
Yeah.
Miami's bad at it. What is it with these schools in Florida?
I don't know. Alejandro Rosario of the Rangers, who was one of the bigger pitching prospect breakouts, another Miami guy, who they just have no clue how to utilize, which is bizarre. That's a good baseball program, but Herick Hernandez is another one, a lefty. It's high carrying, low 90s fastball, 92, 94. I mean, I think the biggest negative on it is like pretty poor extension. But I look at the Braves and think like, all right, they could probably help him out with this release point and extension. He's smaller, so he's 5'10". He's not going to get heavy extension, but you can see that improve a little bit. Sliders got heavy sweeping action, some good depth. It misses bats. Curveball in the upper 70s is nice 2-plane break. Changeup. Being a lefty throwing that changeup against righties, this is going to play mid to upper 80s, 15 inches of fading action. Like Hernandez is probably the drafty that's like, where'd this guy come from? Like not great college stats. And then you step into pro ball next year. He made it to high A this year, probably starts in Rome, goes to double, but I think this guy could really thrive. Yeah, some fun arms for sure.
I love that Atlanta's doing this thing with their drafted pitchers this year where everybody is either 5'11", 6 foot. You look at Herick Hernandez, 5'10", Carter Holton, 5'11", and then you turn around and you look at these massive guys like Luke Sennard, who's 6'8", 250. Like it's extremes here to going out to find guys that are talented. But no, Ronit Shock absolutely cooked in this class. And I think a lot of these guys have looked really good in their debuts, and I'm excited to see where the system goes. Again, folks, if you want more of Chris's work, he's on Twitter at RotoClegg. And again, the dynastydugout.com. I cannot recommend it enough. Just fantastic content. Again, Braves top 30. He's talking about guys that Baseball America and MLB Pipeline don't even have ranked. And it's warranted that they're up there. So if nothing else, you can go snag them in your Dynasty Baseball leagues. Chris, thanks for coming on. You're welcome back whenever you want to come. So just feel free to set that up. And until next time, folks, this has been Braves Today.